Copa America is brought to you on EUROSPORT by Nike.
They came to Ecuador with the spirit of the conquistadores, ready to pillage the oldest existing prize in world international football, the Copa America. Since the demise of the British Championship, this has become the oldest tournament. Ecuador might be considered something of a backwater in South American terms and with many economic problems, but perhaps a big incentive on this occasion was to project an identity which too often has been obscured in the past by the dominance of the other large South American states. So the other nations came to a charming country, desperately anxious to be hospitable, but above all to be successful. They had renovated stadia and practically built a new one at Guayaquil for this particular event. But Ecuador themselves played in Quito, well above sea level, and in this very first game had been placed against perhaps the easiest of all the South American nations, Venezuela. Football extremely important in a country which enjoys or suffers, as the case may be, geographical and economic dichotomy. High altitude and sea level, extreme poverty and great riches. And they wish to show that a seam of the rich and the quality of the life came on the football field. We were to see here one of the most awesome striking powers in the Copa America. And despite the fact that Dudamel was well prepared, watch the foot of Munoz. The Ecuadorian captain putting them in the lead with a glorious free kick. I think that gives you an indication of the enthusiasm and just how important this tournament was going to be for a nation, as I said, wishing to get identity. And even the president had his thumbs up there. Still they pressed on, some outstanding players in this game. And the feat of Ángel Fernández from Emelec, one of the important players, and also Raúl Aviles. But the man who took the eye more than anybody else, Alex Aquinaga, taking that corner kick. The second goal coming off Noriega. Really enjoying this occasion, and one suspects that a great deal of pressure had been placed on the Ecuadorians because of the expectations of the crowd, because of the build-up, because they were the hosts. And a failure would have been catastrophic for them. But that was a good start, 2-0 up at this stage. And the big powerful man up front, Hurtado, very strong indeed. Fernandez with a beautiful little run. And what they were very good at was attacking from the halfway line, quick counter-attacks. And Venezuela never in this game. But one of the major factors in this tournament was playing at altitude, which teams find very hard to do. And the third goal scored by the man I pinpointed earlier on, Fernandez, with a little piece of gymnastics, demonstration of exhilaration to match that of the Terracings. And against a very weak, febrile team, Ecuador were beginning to run riot. Watch the far side again, and back to Hurtado. Glorious header. Hurtado, a centre forward built perhaps in more European lines than South American. tall, bustling, powerful, good judgment in the air, and a kind of goal that perhaps even a Mark Haitley or an Ian Wright would have been proud of. Venezuela, of course, finding it very difficult. They have never beaten Ecuador, but on that occasion, just getting a little break, the goalkeeper coming out to try and get that Espinosa, one of the colourful characters. And that goal scored by Dolgeta 10 minutes from the end. You had to ponder at this stage just how good Ecuador was, or equally just how bad. And perhaps that huge gap indicated that Ecuador were playing against a very weak country indeed. The last goal, beautifully set up there, Fernandez. The last goal in the past 10 minutes, but more was to follow. They tried to keep them at bay, but the Sudgies kept coming. And watch Aguanaga. This little fellow with a ponytail was going to turn out to be a very strong contender for man of the tournament. And later in this program, you'll see exactly why. That's good control and deft finishing. 6-1 the final score, and on to an entirely different game. The United States of America. The tournament was characterized by a major change in emphasis, with the invitation for the very first time to two nations outside the sphere of influence in South America, the United States and of course Mexico. Mexico, who were to do outstandingly well and impress so many people with the quality of their football. But all eyes at this stage on the United States of America. Just how good were they? Under Bora Milutinovic, the Yugoslavian coach, who himself has coached in Central America, particularly in Mexico itself. But the goalkeeper really under pressure. Brad Friedel, a man who was ultimately to come and play a trial for Glasgow Celtic and go. And he had to be good, but beaten there in that very first effort by Aviles. It really only took Ecuador 9 minutes to break this United States defense down. So 4 days after playing against Venezuela, against an entirely different team, they were going further ahead, 2-0. Hurtado, the big man we had seen previously, scoring in the air with a little toe poke there, well beyond Friedel. And the president, there he is, that venerable gentleman, looking as if he would be re-elected by a landslide on the back of these performances, and lapping it up. On to Uruguay. One imagined that Ecuador would have a much harder game. And that header by Aviles, very timely one after 28 minutes. And now we were beginning to say, yes, perhaps the Venezuelans to start off were extremely poor, but there is something in this Ecuadorian team after all. Not just a case of surging national optimism reflecting the mood of the nation, but a great deal of skill, particularly in the penalty areas. But how about that for coming back? A truly marvelous goal there by Canapkis. Uruguay, one of the teams coming here with perhaps more serious intentions for the World Cup itself. Uruguay had included in the 22 Jose Herrera, Ruben Sosa and Enzo Francescoli, but they didn't arrive in time. And with chances like that, brilliantly saved by Espinosa, there is no doubt that they would regret the missing European stars. And towards the end, all the pressure by Ecuador couldn't get them anything. But we were about to proceed to an absolutely marvelous climax. The break way on the right there. Now watch Aguinaga coming in. Look at him. First time shot. And right away, as soon as that hit the back of the net, you began to realize that that perhaps might have been the goal of the tournament. Well, you could see from the disappointment of the Uruguayans that they really had been surprised by the quality of organization. Their coach, Luis Cubilla, the man who was to attract attention by his bulk and his sartorial gear, which was far from elegant. And no wonder they were enjoying all of this. Ecuador progressing. And after that tough fight, looking forward to getting into the final itself. And that glorious goal against Paraguay by Hurtado in the quarter-final gave every indication that we were reaching the climax that everybody in this country had really been expecting. Paraguay organized, but to the point of negativity. Very defensive, hardly ever breaking forward, trying to catch teams in the break against a side with the emphasis purely on attack, 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 and good rhythm. And a brilliant save by Chilavert in goal there as they were ripped apart. Some excellent individual players in this Paraguayan team, but they couldn't knit to any great effect. And there was a desperate own goal. The kind of break just before halftime that Ecuador had been praying for after a lot of frustration in front of goal. And that was put in by Ramirez. And look at the agony that they suffer when that happens in a game. And still playing at altitude, all to the benefit of the home nation. The crowd catching the rhythm as well with the oles from the corrida. And the break coming. An excellently, coolly taken goal, and the goalkeeper, had he brought him down, would have been red carded and sent off. But Aviles, one of the most penetrating of all the Ecuadorians, doing that extremely well, and at the end it should have been more. Aviles himself missing out on that. Not that the crowd were in any way perturbed. And I think an act of penance there for the missing of the penalty kick. Thus emphasizing the fact that so many footballers regard this game as a religion. USA team in the Copa América for the first time. In a tournament prior to this, under Bora Milutinovic's guiding hand and strident voice, as you could see there, they had beaten England by 2 goals to nothing. But all the European stars were no longer there, and Brad Friedel in goal in the little town of Ambato against Uruguay was beginning to prove that he was one of the finest goalkeepers in world football. Uruguay, pedestrian, very ordinary, finding the athleticism of the United States much to their annoyance, looking very predictable, had to put up the defensive shutters from time to time against that eager American team. But Bira Milutinovic wanted to give his team as much of an opportunity as he possibly could, but the very first goal that was scored there by Uruguay in the tournament, Ostaloza, in 51 minutes. The Americans fought back, and this, in fact, after that goal was scored, was the best period. Again, they were playing considerably above sea level, 10,000 feet above sea level, and some of the players doing remarkably well. Luis Cubilla would have been extremely angry with that. And driving in there, that was the way they went to play Ecuador, and simply could not sustain any defense against them, totally under pressure. The best effort just passed. All of their moves coming on the far side from the left flank mostly. And when Ecuador had taken that lead, all they did was sit back a little, realizing there was a great deal of football to be played in the tournament. And that looked like a penalty kick, but the referee just shrugged play off there, turned away from the protests of the United States. Ought to have had a penalty kick, but took very little else out of this. Well, the Americans had indeed a 3-0 win, and disappointing at the end of it all. Still the tournament going on with some very neat football. The Copa América, with its own distinctive style. That was a sign of Luis Cabilla being happy with the way his side had fought back there in a rhythmic game against Venezuela. And there, that ball thrown well in there. And you're watching the first English-spoken goal in the Copa América ever in its history. But that ball stroked in there by Henderson of the United States in his game against Venezuela. And as I had said previously, if ever there was an opportunity for the States to do anything, it would be against this team. And they went 2 up. Ball neatly pushed over the line. And at long last, Bora Milutinovic was getting something. The Venezuelans were getting a wigging from the referee. The game erupting, becoming disorderly, and perhaps the Europeans expecting a little bit of this in the Copa América. And the rather neutral audience here beginning to lose interest in a game which they thought was over. At 2-0, the United States were playing with the greatest of confidence and playing some very good football, and that third goal scored by Kenya put them 3-0 in front, which I think would have given the crowd a bigger interest in the Mexican wave. And there were 1 or 2 United States supporters there lapping this up. But there was more to come, because as Venezuela had proved against Uruguay, they weren't just there as whipping boys and could play a little bit of football. And we're watching now the fight back of the tournament. First of all, Dolgeta making it 3-1. Substitutions brought on there as Harbaugh came on. The Americans getting a little complacent at 3-0. Harbaugh racing into this. He had done very well against the Uruguayans in Ambato. But still Venezuela coming forward. Didn't lose a nerve. Playing the same kind of football, but not just as efficiently as some of the others. But on that occasion, brilliantly struck goal by Dolgeta, his second, 3-2. And now the crowd were beginning to get a little more interested in this game. Well, the Venezuelans enjoying it and perhaps even surprised. They thought at 3-0 there would have been something like a cave-in, but it wasn't to be. And Dolgeta was turning out to be quite outstanding. And Rivas getting a red card. At 3-2, would have thought that would have done, but look at the American defense. It simply opened out. It's something they have to work on, and that was brilliantly taken by Echenose. A minute from time in one of the most exciting games in the tournament so far. 3-all. And these two teams were coached by former Yugoslavians, Dušković and Milutinovic. There they are, sharing, I'm sure, a word in their native language. And the language of that game was never give up. Paraguay had a sensational start in the opening match against Chile. Veteran and captain Roberto Cabañas scoring that goal after 7 minutes. A lot of pressure, but Chile had some great skills and no luck. Chile making many attacks like that. And the frustration writ large in the faces. There was to be only one goal in this game, but it did give us an indication of how these two teams could play. Paraguay, again, a kind of defensive team. It was Paraguay indeed who had instituted the 4-2-4 system way back. And this dreadful tackle, one of the worst of the campaign, had Sanabria sent off. Very, very bad tackle indeed on Cabañas by Margas. And there is Margas going off. You cannot have a South American game without something like that, and the referee at the end had to get police assistance. Brazil-Peru, one of the worst games of the tournament. The Brazilians, much changed from the team that had played in the tournament with England and West Germany. Remember fighting back against West Germany. Peru going through. The Peruvians, a largely unknown force, coached by Vladimir Popovic, the great man from Red Star Belgrade, who had won the European Cup, of course, against Marseille, but in controversial circumstances. One remembers he had coached the team to play for penalties. That's how it seemed to the onlooker, and indeed that is how they won it. So Peru tended to play the ball around a lot, and leaving Brazil to counter-attack like that and miss some glorious chances. Brazil, well captained by Antonio Carlos at the back. Paraguay against Peru. Same kind of style of football by Peru. Circular, playing a lot in midfield without making any great progress. Tending to play the ball across the field. And missing chances like that. And the midfield play of Jose Soto and Carranza and Maestri, all very good, but often being beaten on the break, as they were there. Luis Monson. And that typical move by Paraguay, defending for so much in the game and then breaking forward. And every now and again, the likes of Carranza coming forward to shoot from way out. But the equalizer came. Del Solar, the playmaker of the side, deciding to get into the penalty box 13 minutes from the end. And not bad for a man who usually plays silky football in midfield. Brazil against Chile. The Brazilians had been a huge disappointment in the first game. What could he do this time? Well, what they could do was show that they didn't need Taffarel. Bringing in the younger goalkeeper. Carlos in goal was to prove the mainstay in this game. A game which turned out to be one of the best of the tournament. Everybody sees the Brazilian shirts and expects pyrotechnical display, outstanding, but there they were in exactly 16 minutes, one down through Sierra. And you wondered, given the rather weak display, if they could fight themselves back from this. Müller was beginning to get very prominent, and that was the equalizer. Müller showing only occasional glimpses of his shooting power in this tournament, and that was one of them. And every now and again getting little touches of Brazilian outstanding play, that time by Valber. But Chile were marking extremely well now, defending desperately at times and trying these quick counter-attacks. And slices of luck here as the Brazilians fought to get the lead. Going into half-time, it was anybody's game. And then the break that they needed, beautifully taken. A deserved lead, this time Zambrano. Müller starting to get forward, and perhaps very fortunately there, because he had been going through and he seemed to embellish that, a penalty was awarded. Bit dubious, he made a lot of it, but he was tackled from the back and the penalty was scored. So at 2 each, you could barely say how this game was going to break out. Chile only on the occasional counter-attack, and thankfully everybody in the tournament had seen something, however brief, of true Brazilian play. That's the kind of stuff the Brazilians want to play themselves. Superb moves there. And going for a winner and getting it. The winner scored by Zambrano, his second in the game, and thoroughly deserved, by the way. They refused to buckle under to early Brazilian pressure in the second half, and coming back like that. Chile beating Brazil. You'd never have believed it. Disappointment for the entire Brazilian camp, with only 1 point in the tournament so far. Brazil never do well in the Copa América though, tend to concentrate on the World Cup. Not nearly as effective as Argentina, the record holders in the competition. But now we were into Chile-Peru. And this is a game that matters so much in this section. Brazil, of course, would have preferred a draw between these two teams. But there was to be only one goal in this game after only 15 minutes. Judge this one for yourself. Indeed, a penalty kick. And the captain, Del Solar, beautifully wrong-footing the goalkeeper, Toledo. Very good player. And I'm sure he'll end up perhaps with a European club, as many of these players were in the shop window in this tournament. fighting desperately to get back at this, and an appeal for a penalty kick. Referee marching steadfastly towards the spot. And here the opportunity for Jose Sierra. But a great save by Miranda. And so the Peruvians proving that all the elements could be put together from back to front to give them a successful night. We're now seeing an example of the kinds of things which cause controversy, with Chile fighting back there and scoring what they thought was a beautiful shot by Este, but Zamorano was judged to be offside, and indeed, even from that angle behind the goal, you would agree with that. And weren't they delighted going off there, Chile, against and Peru. So, the coaching of the ex-Yugoslavian had paid dividends. So Chile had to wait for the result of Paraguay against Brazil to see if they would qualify or not. And the Brazilians, of course, insulted by some of the comments being made by the press at this stage, that they had lost their power and the skill and the verve, and desperately anxious to do well. And that was their answer and rebuke to the critics. Müller to Palinha, Palinha to the net. Lovely flick with the outside of the foot that Pele himself would have been delighted with. Paraguay, a boring team to the extreme, were there for the killing. And Brazil took up this challenge like a surgeon with an incisive scalpel. And that might have been an element of luck, but the pressure had been there as Edmundo made it 2-0 after 61 minutes. Now, what was he saying? They got us wrong. Certainly they had received a lot of criticism and perhaps deserved just a little break like that. The Brazilians now wanting to turn on the style. There was no way back for Paraguay, and deservedly so. Finished there by a man determined not to be upset by the criticism. His second goal for Palinha. And so typically Brazilian at long last. The Argentinians came to this tournament with some ambivalent feelings. They wanted to do well in the World Cup above all else, but they have a great deal of pride. They are the team which has won the South American Championship more than any others. They won it 14 times, and they wanted to make sure that they were not going to be dethroned very easily. The champions, after all, in the first game, a little bit nervous perhaps against Mexico, and Batistuta not getting the freedom that Mexico understanding, of course, just how bad it could be for them if they allowed this man to roam at will. Batistuta was going to turn out to score an incredible goal in this tournament much later on. And whilst the Mexicans were playing a lot of good football, Argentina still getting together, as it were, with the new squad, was still strongly in the game. But led by Hugo Sanchez, they were playing extremely well. But the injuries were coming. This was to be a bad blow, as off went Del Salar. And the Argentinians depleted. Their coach, Alfio Basilio, had said he would rest his leading players for the World Cup qualifying games later. But nevertheless, he had turned up with first choice players, except for the suspended Claudio Canigia and Diego Maradona, whose form hardly warranted selection. And there the break, and a typical one by Batistuta. Hardly ever in the game, but give this man just 20 seconds of free time, as was to be proved further on in the tournament, and he punishes defences severely. And having been given that little leeway, they were now showing how strong they were. Some excellent play. And Argentina showing they were not to be taken lightly. And now the great Colombians, already since that tournament, they have proved how brilliant they can be. In that section, of course, as I said, Mexico had played some excellent football, led by Hugo Sanchez. They were the dominant team. But Argentina in that first game, having beaten Bolivia by 1-0, that goal by Batistuta, they tried to get into it, and there, the Colombians with that magnificent goal by Valencia after 35 minutes, now playing in the Bundesliga, of course, and Valderrama, the brains of midfield. They had watched Argentina beating Bolivia in that first game by 1-0. And now here the green-shirted Mexican team, the guests of the tournament, one down after 35 minutes. Tournament comprising of Colombia, Mexico, Argentina and Bolivia. And Rincon going through. Rincon and Valencia, outstanding players, and prompted at the back by some brilliant play and an excellent goalkeeper as well. Cordoba was going to turn out to be one of the colourful characters of this tournament. And Valderrama, looking as if he had escaped from a horticultural show with that bushy hair of his, was also to be easily discernible in the smooth football that he played. And there, getting right behind the defense, I think judged just offside, and Mexico trying to fight back. They were the ones trying to play a lot of good football, and Alves who doesn't look particularly Mexican, tall and fair and playing way down the left as he did throughout the tournament, snapping that little piece of comfort to make it one each. And then we had a breakdown of the floodlights. It gave the players a little rest, but no respite for the Mexican defense to come when they restarted this game. Mexico have always found it very easy. In fact, the first team this year to qualify for the World Cup. They play in a rather weakish group, and of course they are a football-obsessed country. Now playing in a tournament befitting their style, and the ball went over, according to the referee. Now this was to be one of the most controversial goals of the tournament. There's nobody but nobody, even looking at television replays, could prove that that ball had gone over from Aristizábal. And what exacerbated the controversy was it came exactly 45 seconds from the final whistle. Well, did you think it went over? I think we'd had to have had one of these little miniature cameras installed in the back of the net, and look, the police had to come on to calm the passions in one of the flare-ups of the competition. No flare-up at the sight of the pretty young ladies of Ecuador, just part of the elegance of this country, and out to the important game. I talked about Argentina playing Mexico right at the start, and they had in their minds those two teams as the possible top two teams of the group, and now here they were meeting. Argentina proving to be very strong, breaking from midfield. A lot of excellent players on both sides. Mexico had played it quietly to start with, then built up their game in the very first game against Mexico, and against Colombia, desperately unlucky to have lost that controversial goal, but it hadn't depressed them, and led by Hugo Sanchez, well backed up by Alves, Galindo and Munoz. They were doing that sort of thing to the Argentinian defense. And that quick interplay in midfield was to become a characteristic of this Mexican side. Feeding it out to Alves, one of the most prominent attackers. And a free kick right at the start. Magnificent play by the Mexicans, with Patino scoring in 14 minutes. Argentina were really rattled now. The Mexicans going at them full blast, and a great effort there by David Patino, who plays for UNAM. Argentina playing in a very mechanical way. And every now and again, that breakaway, not at all the kind of inspired players that would get the mariachi band strumming heavily. Whipped across here by Claudia Garcia from Racing Club, and the ball put in the back of the net. That eventual equalizer by Ruggeri after 28 minutes. But Argentina had failed to impress. All the good football was being played by Mexico in midfield, just like this. Beautiful breakaways, Alves in there. And you saw a save there by Sergio Goycochea, who later on was to play one of the most significant parts in the tournament. And right from the second game that Argentina had played, we were watching one of the great goalkeepers in the world in action. And that time he was left stranded, and Mexico at this stage was showing they were extremely unlucky, only to be held at 1-1. Still the attacking going on, and the man on the David Patino on the right there was running this defense ragged. Galindo with the corner kick and all the shooting going on at the other end, and for the second time in the game, Goycochea having to cope with a deflection. Well, Basile Boli not looking, Basile not looking at all well. Well, with one each in that particular game, in that section, it was to move on to Colombia against Bolivia. Valderrama again prominent in midfield. Bolivia hadn't started off all that well, but they showed they had been a stuffy team. And there's his goalkeeper showing his skills. I think he'd want to come down and try a shot at goal. The man, of course, is Cordoba. We're to see a lot more of him. And this proved to be infectious. All goalkeepers were wandering out of the penalty areas. And it's doubtful whether you would call it creative, perhaps more erratic on occasions than anything else. Bolivians full of neat, tidy football like this, and Colombia being rather taken aback, especially by that opening goal. Nobody really gave them a chance in this game, but Echeverri, after 15 minutes, had made it 1-0. And again, we were excited by the play of Valderrama, Aristizábal, Rincon. Valencia was not in the first selection, and a softish penalty. Sandy having been brought down. Hardly any complaint from the Bolivians. And Aristizábal, that neat little player, dominated by the two men beside him, Rincon and Valencia, settled the issue, but they only share the points. And now the laser beam display as Colombia come out to play in this very important game against Argentina. Argentina, would they play a kind of mechanical style to suit the manager Basile? Because Alfio Basile had said that he wanted this primarily for a warm-up for the World Cup. And now looking back on this game and the knowledge of what Colombia did to Argentina, I wonder if Colombia were going through an education process here, summing the Argentinians up, wondering in the game that they were going to play in the World Cup itself, how they could take them apart. Well, they did it successfully, but how about this for one of the cutest goals of the tournament? Simeone, after only 2 minutes, showing what the Argentinians are really made of. Now, he could have played for a penalty kick, and it's rather surprising. Argentinian players would normally do that, fall about, but he didn't that time. And maybe it was the European influence on Simeone. But that equaliser, as glorious as you will find anywhere. Rincon, 3 minutes after that goal by Simeone, making it 1-0. And that's the kind of stuff that was going to excite crowds all over South America later on, as this man Valderrama became the creative hub in the spoke of all these attacks. And there they had, as Rincon went through again, a very legitimate claim for a penalty kick. Colombia were in full flow. 65,000 were attracted to this game in Guayaquil. The biggest crowd outside the host nation's performances, and they were getting their money's worth, as after attack, with Valencia having come on to make, to my mind, along with Aristizábal, the most exciting strike force in the tournament. And a lot of rough tackling going on. And with that, the sad figure going off there of Freddy Rincon, lashing out after a bad tackle, sent off. And that was going to turn out to be significant. Again, the escort of the police there. Again, finishing 1-1. The final standings: Colombia at the top, Argentina second. The outcome of the tournament hinged enormously on penalty kicks. Some of the exciting play in this game, of course, between two teams of different and contrasting styles. Colombia playing extremely well against Uruguay with that kind of flair and dynamic runs by Rincon and Valencia, well backed up by Aristizábal. The Uruguayans certainly didn't like it, but there was a mix of good play, flair, but no punch in this particular game. The build-up was good, the finishing awful. Valderrama's player, though he's much slower than some of his younger players and some of the opposition, but playing the ball beautifully, making football look ridiculously simple at times. There he is, look at that little touch there, full of that. But every now and again when they broke forward like that, there was always somebody coming behind them. Valderrama again trying to set this up. And that glorious finish there just past the left-hand post. And of course, Asprilla was to come on in this game as well. Asprilla, the man from Parma, and there, against the entire run of play, a goal by Saralegui. And so typical of Uruguay, they had been on the receiving end of what was potentially a right thrashing, but bad finishing had made it impossible for them to be disregarded, and that's exactly what the Colombians did, and breaking away in a typical Uruguayan fashion. And I think many of the people watching this tournament very disappointed with that. They were very much in favor with the way Colombia and Mexico were playing their football. But Valderrama refused to give up. Free kick there, and it was all his work that brought that about. They had brought Asprilla on, trying to go around the outside, and what about that glorious goal that was scored by fullback Perea, and only 2 minutes from time. Well, I think the people from Ecuador were as delighted to see that as the Colombians. fully justifying the lovely play they had demonstrated earlier in the game, and indeed throughout the tournament. And look how cutely that was taken by Valderrama, and Pereira with a glorious finish. Well, there's been a lot of talk, and the penalty finish, a lot of talk about penalty finishes. They are controversial. The players, we are told, do not like them. But it was to come to that. And this is how it finished. Goalkeeper against goalkeeper even. Well, the goalkeeper complaining that there had been a hesitation in the run there, but utter dejection. The two goalkeepers together, two trade unionists, if you like, in that particular bracket, getting together there, one to console the other, but Colombia had gone through. And now the treat to set before the president himself, a succulent dish you would have thought on offer. The one we had all waited for, Argentina against Brazil. The Argentinian team, still minus these three players who said they would have brought with them, but getting as much out of Goycochea, Zapata, Gorosito, Simeone, Batistuta running up front as Basil would have expected, and in there the men with Brazil. Again we saw this contrast in styles. It is somehow astonishing when you think back that Brazil have only won this tournament 4 times. Every now and again they give the impression they've never had their heart in this. But I think the sight of the old rivals and their jerseys was bringing the best out of the likes of Müller, and Müller needing a little bit of support, and the Argentinian defence looking quite shattered at times. The Brazilians beginning to run better. He appeals for the penalty, and a delightful shot there by a man who was turning out to be one of the stars of the tournament from Sao Paulo, Cafu, the fullback, for whom there will be a great career. It was almost constant attack against counter-attack. The Argentinians, though, a little bit ragged in front of goal. Much better play there. Play there by Palhinha. Palhinha looking very good. Top goal scorer, and Müller. Müller, who had had a quite-ish tournament, every now and again erupting forth like that. A delightful touches there by Edmundo. They were attacking on both flanks, and that was the kind of goal that would win any tournament. And the man I had been talking about, who'd had a somewhat patchy tournament, Müller, driving it in after 37 minutes. Glorious the way he set it up for himself, got a little bit of space, and to beat a goalkeeper like Goycochea between himself and the near post is some feat. The Brazilians looking very confident now, and Goicoechea perhaps the busiest man of all. Replacements happening. Batistuta, who'd been marked out of the game. And if you do that, you draw a lot of Argentinian teeth. But on as a substitute, a man who is going to turn the course of the game, Leo Rodriguez, from Atlanta in Italy. And going into the second half, Goicoechea having to use the skill of a Beckenbauer to get out of that situation. That's the man I was talking about. Keep your eye on him. Number 20, Rodriguez. And that's what Cordoba liked to do. Although that was a bad one that time. Driven very wildly as Franco came forward. The Argentinian defense, of course, had remained very steady indeed. They looked very solid there. But realizing as the game was going on that it was also slipping away from them, they picked up its pace. And so the pressure was on the Brazilians. Waiting for an opportunity to take the corner kick. And a glorious goal. There he is. Rodriguez rising up high on that. And doing very well, given the fact that the goalkeeper was well positioned as well. Marvelous piece of timing. One each. Well, this really stung the Brazilians. They tended to sit back a little bit, which was dangerous and bad tactics. And Argentina really flowing into attack and appeals for a penalty kick. And I think that was a faint-hearted decision by the referee. Nice move forward there by Alberto Acosta. All the running was coming from Brazil now. I think rather pained by the fact that they'd played all the good football and couldn't put it away, as Müller couldn't there either. And so into this agonizing penalty shootout again. We'd already seen one in the tournament, and the coach is in there soothing the nerve. The penalties. And now Goicoechea in command. and about to be swamped. Let's watch this. Now he's moving on the line, but all goalkeepers slightly move like that. And that's saved by goal Couture, parrying the sixth shot. Led to this. That was it. May well have been a sad ending for Brazil, but one hero, and there was the Argentinian physio, who was delighted in doing that. And now Argentina-Colombia. Well, Colombia had played the kind of football we expected from Brazil. Led by Valderrama, the most astute and intelligent player in the competition, with a lot of good finishers. And we expected from these two teams this contrast again, with Colombia trying to turn on the style and Argentina trying to ensnare them in midfield and then break away. Argentina, though, had improved from their first game when they looked at 6s and 7s. And then they really began to put it together with a whole sequence of exciting runs by the Colombians, with Faustino Asprilla back in full action after that injury, which had kept him out of the European Cup Winners' Cup final and out of the earlier stages of this tournament. He was back in the side. And Cordoba, Oscar Cordoba in goal from Once Phillips, is going to be a very important figure in this game again. And what about Goycochea? Straight from his penalty triumphs, one of the saves of the tournament, if not the save. Still, Colombia playing all the football. Rincon, Valencia, all of them there, and that was put in the back of the net, but to the anguish of the Colombians, the referee had spotted offside immediately. Nothing each. And once again, the penalties. Goycochea had been named the human barrier after that performance in the previous penalty shootout against Brazil. And there he was, calm, relaxed, untainted by the publicity he'd had. Up against it again, and there he was. Yet again, a great act of skill and anticipation. And now the time for silent prayer. This meant so much. Once again, Argentina had done it. And Colombia, playing all the good football in this game, felt desperately disappointed. The green shirts of Mexico. They call them Area Mexico because they traveled from city to city for each game, traveling more than any other team. And they, of course, were the visitors. Mexico had played some absolutely delightful football. And now here they were, progressing towards the final stages. And Mexico, captained by Hugo Sanchez, one of the great players, trying to prove, of course, that they were justified in being considered one of the favorites for the tournament, linked with Argentina and Brazil. But they'd always fancied Mexico because they had qualified for the World Cup. They could relax a little bit more, put a great deal of emphasis on this tournament. So there was no doubt about it that in this game that they were playing against Bolivia, it was football that mattered more than anything else to them. Keeping possession, showing their great skills, trying to get it to Alves. But in this game in Porto Viejo, luck was running out for both sides. The spectators had come to see something not only of Mexico playing well in midfield, but finishing. But at times they were defending desperately. The team and outstanding for them had been Alex Garcia, Luis Alves, Hugo Sanchez, of course. And Alves picking up a lot on the left. And Sanchez denied, everybody willing him to score a goal. And off they travelled again. The Peruvians this time. Here in the quarter-final against Peru. Good running all round. This was to turn out to be one of the most exciting games in the tournament. A lot of bad luck to start off with. But the Mexicans always looking the more threatening side. A lot of the good play in midfield, of course, and in this game they had picked a midfield line of Ambris, Patino, Galindo, and still Hugo Sanchez had been denied a goal. And that's what they were full of. This is what the crowd loved about him, and that clearly was a penalty. The referee had no way out of that. So the first goal scored from the penalty spot by Garcia Aspe in the 22nd minute. Mexico had qualified so easily for World Cups in the past. Never really demonstrated their great skills in front of anything other than their own audiences. But there was Alves scoring the second. Right on the stroke of half-time. And not to be outdone, Aspe with the most glorious shot. Made it 3-0, all that before half-time, and Peru looked dead and buried. And from that angle you could see the goalkeeper had no chance at all. Well, that was the fruition coming from all that early play we had seen. There was a lot of that in this Mexico side. An abundance of outfield talent, all a matter of just converting it into goals. Now they were beginning to make it appear they could do that. 3 in one half and going for more in the second. Sanchez unselfishly laying that off. Glorious play. 4-0. We were now watching the best football of the tournament, even compared to Colombia. The difference between Mexico and Colombia is that this side and the green shirts were putting the ball in the back of the net. With Patino, who scored that one. And in the time-honored way of teams who've gone so far in front, the Mexicans started to relax a little. And a big Del Solar coming up there, wonderful player, coming forward, looked to be offside as he picked that up, and the penalty was given. Now, initially it looked blatantly offside, but at 4-0 the Mexicans weren't too perturbed. And in it went. Goal scored eventually by Del Solar himself. One of the most elegant players in the tournament, but playing in a team content to defend more than anything else, and a sign of Popovic's strategy. Second goal scored there, but very late on in the game, only 7 minutes remaining. And the Mexicans more slightly embarrassed than mortified by that. Excellent game then by Mexico. And the huge expectant crowd building up to what should be one of the games of the tournament. A team that had played the most attractive games against the host nation. Well, we had seen some excellent play. There's little doubt about that. And Hugo Sanchez, very experienced, 35 years of age, with one of the most colourful characters in football, the Mexican goalkeeper Campos, in his glorious stadium at Guayaquil. Looking for little 1-2s that would pay off. Some marvellous play there. The Ecuadorian team taken apart, and now they were playing against the stiffest opposition they had met so far, and they weren't liking it. Just every now and again a break down the right, but having to deal with the Mexican goalkeeper, as I said, he just loved to be in the centre of the action. And that goal, that opening goal, deservedly so, for the man who had worked so very, very hard to get the ball in the back of the net throughout the tournament, Hugo Sanchez. He had played unselfishly, laying the ball off to others, and everybody in this crowd, bar the most fanatical Ecuadorian, delighted to see this highly talented player getting on the score sheet, and still at the age of 35 doing a kind of Olga Korbut. The Mexicans relaxed. Ecuador got more and more tense. Aguinaga tried his best to revive them, but time was running out. And far too much room for Alves. Well, Hugo Sanchez, having got the bit between his teeth, getting into the penalty area now with a bit more conviction. And there, that little flick forward into the back of the net meant it was all over for Ecuador in the semi-final. 2-0, Ramirez scoring the second goal. And the referee about to bring to an end a national dream. Mexico had beaten the host nation 2-0, and a team adequately prepared for the final itself. Colombia, different shirts. On the attack against Ecuador and putting it away in the third place playoff. So, third place to Colombia, the final to come. Well, perhaps a tango for one of the sides and a dirge for the others. That sums up any final, I suppose. Argentina against Mexico, coming from two entirely different footballing cultures. Mexico playing a delightful passing game, particularly from midfield, well led by Sanchez, giving inspiration as well as stature to the side. The Argentinians playing in fits and starts throughout this tournament. Some very, very strong players indeed. Batistuta had been substituted when he became suddenly inept in the game against Brazil, but the substitution had paid off for the Argentinians in the most glorious way. There were, in the Mexican side, some great individual performances. I did like Luis Alves throughout this tournament. Campos in goal was quite outstanding. Galindo, an inspiration with beautiful little touches in midfield. And now the Mexican team playing in the first ever Copa America in the final. That in itself a considerable achievement. Argentina, the champions, having won the tournament 14 times previously. And a great deal of strain on Miguel Mejia Barón, the Mexican coach. The Argentinians, of course, are fanatical about football themselves. Their media and their supporters extremely critical. And Hugo Sanchez giving this last warm-up talk. A team talk that I suppose emphasizes Mexico to be exactly as they've always been in the tournament, playing the ball around, working hard, and there was their support. Well, the betting men had put the money on Argentina, despite the fact that their form had been patchy, from indifferent to reasonable. Certainly very rarely had struck any tone of brilliance, except from the goalkeeper Goycochea. Goycochea himself quite outstanding. They had in midfield some very good players in the likes of Simoni, Franco, Ruggeri, Redondo, Basualdo. And taking size of this Mexico defense right away. The crowd in the stadium for the final not as big as it would have been had there been Ecuador into it. Well, he may have been colourful, Campos, but he was also very, very efficient as a goalkeeper. That was Alves. And Goycochea, two fine goalkeepers. Wonderful opening to this game. But seeing nothing so far of Mexico playing the ball around creatively in midfield, largely because the Argentinians were closing them down very well and breaking away like this. Wonderful breakaways from time to time, with Simoni putting it in, and there a miss by Batistuta. The coach would not have liked that, hadn't really been on his form. And in this first half, a kind of nervous quality to the play. Mexico, of course, used to playing in the great Azteca Stadium and trying out Goycochea there. So at least they're quite at home here. The crowd of only 40,000. Well, appeals for a penalty kick. And Hugo Sanchez running away. Lovely little touch inside there. Alves it pushed it back, and Ramirez had been brought down. Well, Basile right out and annoyed about all of this. Going into a second half, score nothing each. The referee having eventually turned down that claim. And as this game progressed, I have to say at the time, I did feel that events were going Argentina's way. Batistuta, as I said, had a thin time of it, very much a marked man. Alves occasionally breaking away. That long stride of his, very effective. And appeals that he had been brought down by Basualdo. And still the Argentinian defense rock steady. Batistuta breaking away. Batistuta with a marvelous finish, and after an indifferent tournament, that I think would restore his reputation. 65 minutes gone, and sheer grit and determination bringing this goal about, and Campos, I suspect, thought the ball was going to his far right-hand side. There was a determined man, I think stung by some of the criticism he had received. Substitution. This is the man who had turned the game against Brazil. Coming on again, Leo Rodriguez from Atlanta now. You began to wonder if Mexico would fold. There was a bit of an injustice, of course, about that, because they had played a lot of good football. Alves goes through and brought down by Goycochea. Goycochea's only lapse of the tournament so far, and this time, as opposed to that dispute in the first half, a penalty kick. Now watch Goycochea making that rush. Well, it might have been a little unfortunate for him. The player was going to the left anyway, but Mexico were back on level terms. Batistuta going forward again. Now, if ever a man redeemed himself in a tournament, it was he. Actually overjoyed. Marvelous finishing. Only 5 minutes of the game remaining, and that was that. I think everybody in the crowd realized a crunching blow like this would finish Mexico off. But right at the end, trying to bring Goycochea to his knees. Well, they succeeded in doing that, but nothing much more. And getting ready to celebrate, the Argentinian bench, as the game drew to its conclusion. And up came the goalkeeper as well there. The most astonishing attack. And ready to invade the field to celebrate. At the end of a tournament that had a full share of very good football, but some indifferent stuff as well. The Argentinians proving they must never be underrated. The Mexicans, lovely football, the kind of football I personally like to watch, but needing a bit more dig. And the Mexicans wondering if the final whistle would go any second. And there it was. Celebrations now for Argentina. Not the best Argentinian team ever seen, but one which did distinctly improve throughout the tournament. If it went on purest football, the Mexicans were the better. But Argentina, Campeón Copa América, 93. There the supporters, looking forward now to the World Cup. Signifying the end of the tournament. And the cup goes back to Buenos Aires. The announcement, the champions of South America. And Goicoechea, no man deserves the holding of that cup more than he. He was a man who had saved them in 2 penalty shootouts. And if you have a goalkeeper like that, then you have every opportunity in the world to use the other talent that you have. And to Batistuta, a contradictory performance, very insipid in the early stages of the game, of the tournament, and then suddenly that eruption at the end with 2 marvellously taken goals. But for them, the much more important task was to come, the qualifying for the World Cup, and with it, embarrassment. So their celebrations for becoming yet again the 15th time champions of South America were to be brief. They enjoyed it whilst it lasted. In this, the Copa America.